And we're back with a new episode of Talking with Doyle. I'm Hunter Kipe, and I'm joined with State Representative Doyle Heffley. And we have a special guest star today, State Representative Stephanie Scialabba, who represents parts of Butler County, correct?
Correct.
Perfect.
The 12th legislative district.
Yes, 12th legislative district.
That's a little bit west of Carbon County. Carbon County is just a little bit west of New Jersey, and Butler's out there a little bit. So.
A little bit east of Ohio.
A little bit east of Ohio, so there's a little bit of space in between us. But we have a lot of the same concerns and the same interests when it comes to cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, TikTok, and a couple things. So on this episode, we're going to talk a little bit, and you are quite the specialist when it comes to this. And I think that's one of the great things about the House of Representatives, and I love serving in the State House, is that the diversity inside of our caucus and inside of the House. We have attorneys, we have people that worked in the logistics industry, we have folks that were contractors, we have people that are ministers, we have all walks of life. But in just listening to you and talking to you a little bit about this subject, I thought it was important to try to sit down on the podcast and talk a little bit about what's going on in this world. We all have our phones. Everybody's glued to their phones all the time. And the younger generation, Hunter, and people, and your generation, and younger than you, and I see it with younger, even children of like preschool, always drawn to pick up the phone and see what's going on with it. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things we've been working on in the House. We've had a couple bills. So Stephanie, if you could just maybe mention a little bit about your background and talk about maybe the big topic of the day, TikTok.
Sure. So I will start by saying that I have a 3-year-old at home who loves my Doan. That's how he says phone. So he's always like, Mommy, Doan. Give me your Doan. And no, I'm not going to. So it's a battle already. And he's only 3. And he can work it, which is even scarier.
Yes, it is.
So, but I am a cybersecurity data privacy lawyer by trade. That's what I did for the better part of a decade. And I started practicing when all of these laws started coming out on cybersecurity and data privacy. And, we started seeing things like a flashlight app that you download, and this gets into TikTok too. California took the lead on it, and I'm never one to say we should be like California, but California took the lead on consumer protection and consumer privacy laws because people were downloading apps and then they would not expect all of the sort of intrusions into their personal lives and data that comes with that. So the notorious flashlight app that was tracking your location. Why would anybody think that your location is being tracked and shared by a flashlight app? So that's kind of what started this whole thing. That was the catalyst, and that launched my path as a lawyer. And I brought that with me to the House. So I'm the co-chair of the bicameral Senate and House Cybersecurity Caucus. I was just appointed to the AI Task Force for the Commonwealth. And there's a lot of work to be done. We passed my bill on data privacy last week or earlier this week, and we can talk about that too. But there's a lot happening, and TikTok, like I said, it's I don't think people realize when they sign up for an entertainment app that it's not just what they provide, that they think they're providing or sharing on that app that's getting taken and shared.
I think the thing that's scary about it, obviously everybody knows the link to the Chinese Communist Party, get which is one of the biggest propaganda mouthpieces in the world, right? I mean, that's what they do. It's how they control they're not a free society. They don't have freedom of speech. They don't have right to privacy. They can't even walk out of their house without their phone in their hand. They have facial recognition if you want to go to the grocery store. So there's a whole level of intrusion that they apply onto their population. But I think it's important when people realize when you give up that TikTok, and I was listening to a speaker talk about this, and some folks have heard me say this, but if the product is free, if you're not paying for it, then you're the product. And the key to that is what they want is your data. Personal data is the hottest commodity right now on the world market. And when you download an app like TikTok, it's not just you're getting some catchy videos. And how does TikTok know what videos you want to see all the time? It's because you gave them that information. Because as soon as they get into your phone, they get access to everything in your phone. It's like putting a camera in your bedroom, a camera in your bathroom, a camera in your car. They know how fast you drive. They know where you go. They know where you shop. They know everything about you. They know who you're around, because if other people have TikTok on their phone, and now the three of us are in this room right now, if somebody has TikTok and somebody else does, they know that you're together. They know who you associate with. They know your political views. And why that's so dangerous and why there's some skepticism about that is because they then take that information, and we've seen it back during the riots and the LM riots and some of the other things that go on in our society when they are force feeding information to a population to pretty much control a response and be that Pied Piper that controls the response of a population. And that's why it's so dangerous. And we know of stories where the Chinese government was actually tracking personal data on members of the military that were maybe they lived an alternative lifestyle or they had certain habits, and they were tracking that and using that to try to blackmail them. So it's really scary at that level. But even aside from that, TikTok is probably the biggest offender right now. But this isn't alone a TikTok issue. TikTok is just controlled by the Chinese Communist government. But
well, and that's what kind of is the bad part, right? Because it's not just TikTok in isolation as an app, and it's not just TikTok in isolation as, there's a software developer sitting in there, and it's not just free flow of information, right? It's perfectly tailored to what you like, and you might not even know what you've given it to figure out what you like. And so its effect is amplified because TikTok is AI too, in a sense. Yeah. The algorithms that they use to figure out what you like and what you would prefer and what you may be interested in, and then they start to feed. And then that's why your feed, you're getting fed information. Everyone's like, oh, check out my feed. You realize you're actually getting fed information. So you're not getting, the full gamut of what's available out there. You're getting things tailored to you, and that algorithm is susceptible to anything. And, it's that famous saying, knowledge is power. Mm-hmm. It is. And so just like you said, if it's free, then you're probably the product. And I agree with that. I've never heard that said before, and I agree completely. And the problem is it's one thing to know that. It's another to not know it, right? Yes. And so many people don't know. And so I'm not one for bans, generally speaking. I'm really not. I think we need to have a better job because, okay, so we ban TikTok, but then what, right? And there are other companies out there that can just give it to CCP anyway. Mm-hmm. So I hate to say what's the point, right? But at least with this one that came through our house, it's limited to government-owned devices, and maybe it was easier to do it this way than just to roll out your own policy internally in all the government offices. It says no TikTok on government-owned devices. Maybe that's better, right, to do it this way. But we can't just, call it a day, put our feet up and say, okay, all is done, all is well. Mm-hmm. We need to do a better job at educating people so that they know that all of this information is accessible and potentially going to be exploited.
Yeah. And I think the key is this isn't like tinfoil hat society. Like, this is very real. This is stuff that is happening, and it's not, and TikTok is probably, like I said, one of the worst offenders, but any other entity can sell that to you, whether it be Google or Facebook, and we know the problems with Facebook has had, or Meta now that they changed their name. But it is important that people understand what they're getting, because you think, well, what do I care if Facebook knows where I'm at? Well, you should care that they're invading your privacy. We have a Fourth Amendment right in this country to the right to privacy, and so I couldn't live without my phone, as many of us can't. If I'm going somewhere, I need directions, it's there. If we have an emergency, you need to call somebody, it's there. I can tell you, we were traveling not so long ago, and AT&T had a nationwide shutdown, and there were a lot of people stranded in the airport because they couldn't get an Uber. A lot of people have all their credit cards and everything through their phone and not a physical card. So it is something to be cognizant. Like, any of these things can with the blink of an eye be shut down. But so I think what it is it's a new technology, and learning to manage it and informing people so that we can have all the tools and all the things that we want to see. I mean, the fact that I can watch a movie at any on Netflix on an app on my phone, I think it's great. However, what privacy we're giving up, how much should people know, and where does government's role come in? You and I both stand for living in government, but government is only one part of it. We hear all the time, don't give my information to the government. You just gave your information to the Chinese government. I mean, so I think that's what people need to understand. And what do you feel is the role of government going forward to protect the citizens of our nation from these? These are the wealthiest and most powerful corporations in the world. You think about Ford and Chrysler, and people talk about the big. The technology sector is the most wealthy and most powerful powerful and influential companies in the world, and it's only a handful of companies that control technology throughout the whole world. So what do we, as legislators, need to do to make sure that our populace, our constituents, have the resources they need to be protected?
Yeah.
But actually, going back to what you said, Stephanie, the ban. So the legislation, Senate Bill 379, that would ban government employees from using TikTok while at work. Is it just specifically at work in a government building, or what would that actually detail?
No, I think it's on any government-owned device.
Government-owned device.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if I would use TikTok on my cell phone, for instance, that would be affected by using the Wi-Fi.
Well, and see, so that's the question, right? That's where all of this is going to play out, and we talk about this in caucus too. Where, like, if I connect to the Wi-Fi, I purchased my phone myself. This is the same phone I had before assuming office, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I connect to the Wi-Fi now, does that mean I'm under, the umbrella of this bill?
Yeah.
Is it all the time because my Outlook, which is tied to the house, is that always, that's always connected to the internet. It's always active. Does that mean that I can't ever have TikTok on my phone? I don't have TikTok on my phone, but if I did, and so I think it's a good question. And then some people raise the issue too, technically, I think the way they did it was tax dollars are used to acquire the device. Our salaries are technically tax dollars. Does that mean that and yours are too, does that mean any government employee's iPad, their phone, with or without? You get into privacy implications too, not just from TikTok, but also into
your own home.
Your own home and the employer. In the state. Again, it's
now at the federal level, they're working on divesting TikTok. So not really canceling TikTok or banning TikTok, but saying TikTok, you need to divest from the Chinese Communist government. And then TikTok could still be the entity. They'll still do all the things and get your privacy, but it just won't be linked to the government in China or the government in Russia or any other of these places.
Maybe not in terms of ownership, but they can still sell the data.
Yeah.
They can do whatever they want. That's why I introduced that privacy bill too, because I don't know that it's government's place to constantly nanny all of its citizens and to say, we want to shield you from this. That has major implications for the First Amendment.
Yeah.
And you can't, make the cure worse than the disease.
Yes.
And so we have to be careful when we walk this line. So I think maybe education and returning that knowledge back to the people and let them make their choices. I understand, you want to ban it for government employees. That I get, right? Because they are your employee.
Government
right.
devices.
Government
so,
devices,
yeah.
right? Government devices connected to, because there's an extra layer there, and you're not forced to work for the government, right? We don't live in that state. We live somewhere where you and I can choose to take office. We give certain things up, right? Certain aspects of privacy, including certain aspects of control, and we give for the greater good of protecting our Commonwealth and our nation. And we are targeted more as government officials, right? But I think if we would return power to your average Joe, right, and say, hey, here's what's going on, be aware. And the way that we do that is through a bill like what I passed, which was that data privacy bill, where you require all of these companies to have a privacy policy in place that says, here's what we collect, here's how we collect it, here's where we send it, here's if we share it, here's if we sell it, and then give people the option to control it. No, you can't sell my data. No, you can't use it for A, B, and C purpose. I want you to delete my data. If we don't have those rights established, we don't have them. And while that may seem completely backwards, right, it should be like unless you actively take that right away, you should have it. We don't live in a society like that. We have to act and say, these are your rights as Pennsylvanians. These data privacy laws are state specific. They stay within state lines. And so you really need to make sure that we are keeping pace with the technology that's out there. I know that we're talking about the federal government's ban on TikTok, but that's just going to address TikTok.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's so much more.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be banned. We can't, like I said, you can't make the cure worse than the disease.
And at the same time, it's so important that people understand, especially if you have children that are 11, 12. Would you let your 12-year-old's information be sold to, say, maybe a website that promotes things that you don't believe in, and you're allowing them to have all of your child's information when you click on that app? And it's why it's so important when you read that app but that these companies are forthcoming, and if you make that choice. But as a parent, it's tough to regulate that, and a lot of times, the kids are better with the phones, and they're putting stuff on their phone that the parents are barely keeping up with. Because we're doing it all that you're going to work, you're coming back, you're all the other things, and the technology is so easy and accessible, and it's just like the cigarette companies advertising to children. This is no different, and we see the effects in the behavioral health of younger people who have been drastically affected by social media.
And the other thing too, besides like the mental health aspect of it, that I think these kids, I mean, I've noticed it too. When my son watches too much TV, especially YouTube, it's not like Little Bear, that we all used to watch, but when
Bluey,
he watches,
I like Bluey.
he hates Bluey, But anyway, I think the dog likes it. But besides that, but I've seen behavioral differences too. He's calmer when he doesn't have that constant stimulation, and that just like it's overpowering. But I will say, from a privacy perspective, I think it's generational. I think the younger generations don't care as much about privacy as the older generations do. So, I mean, if what boomer is going to use TikTok? Maybe some, but in general, they're like, stay away from me, right? But then you go down the line, and
I'm not a boomer, just
well,
for the record.
I'm
not a
saying
boomer.
you're a boomer.
I don't have TikTok, but I'm not a boomer.
I'm not saying you're a boomer. Nothing wrong with the
I do
boomers.
have Facebook, and I now have an Instagram account. And
you're welcome.
Here's
and
the
I love
real
all
question
those
though.
tools,
Do
but it's
you
how do you
access
manage them?
Facebook from your computer?
Do I access Facebook?
Do you have to, like, does he type in Facebook,
Do you do that?
www.facebook.com?
I feel like you do.
I don't I have it set up on my computer at home, but for the most part, I mean, I really
See,
I don't
then
know how
you're
many
not a
people
boomer.
actually do like
That's
use a
debatable.
computer. I'm tech savvy, but I mean, I use my phone. I have more apps on here than I really know how to use or want to use, quite honestly. But I have
defending himself.
I have an iPad. But no, I do think it's important, and it's something you got to keep up with all the time, and it's always changing. And now with AI is thinking faster than people
humans.
and than humans. So they're like one step ahead of you. It's like that where the guy tries to shut the computer off before the end of the world, and the computer already planned him coming to shut it off. Kind of scary, but look, AI is a tool, and I met today with some folks that are developing some high tech telehealth devices where they can do ultrasounds. Plug into your iPad, and a woman can do an ultrasound and relay that to the doctor. The advancements are wonderful, but at the same time, there's pros and cons to everything. And how do we as a government and as a society, more or less, manage that so we don't fall into pitfalls? Because I can tell you, the cost right now in behavioral health for young folks, and I think it's a lot dependent on social media and how people are spoon-fed. And I think when you mentioned about how these feeds just give you information, a lot of times people they want to find information, so they do a Google search. Hey, Google, show me the news of the day. Well, they're going to spoon-fed you because they don't care about giving you the news. They only care about you staring at the screen because they sell those impressions and that data. So you're not getting a picture of the news. You're
not
strictly
balanced.
strictly seeing what they think is going to pique your interest, and that, I think, is the biggest. As somebody in public service, sometimes it pains me to read some of the articles that I don't agree with, but I think it's important that you see all that. And with social media and how they feed information, because they're not news agencies. It's not information. They only care about your impression, and they want your impression so they can sell your data for profit, period.
Well, as someone who comes from the generation where I grew up with a computer and it was easy to navigate, I don't turn to Google anymore when I want to search something. I go on TikTok, and that's where I search it.
But that's
Oh my
just as
God.
bad.
It's
not
probably worse, but I get something faster, and it's like, ooh, do I think it's 100% accurate? No, but I mean, it's not so much about like a search engine for me for news. It's
but the thing is, what's
learning about
really
different
bad,
things.
but that goes right back to my point, that the danger with that is now China, the Chinese government, who is our adversary. They don't want America. So they are spoon-feeding a whole generation of people news to influence you, and we've seen it with the Palestinian when they massacred all the Jewish people when they parachuted in with machetes, and then people are like, oh, they're not such bad people because these were terrorist acts, but TikTok was feeding information, and so that's just one part of it. What about when they go to take over Thailand? You're really getting into some deep thought, but it
Well,
is
do you
very
remember
concerning.
during COVID, all the stuff that came out? I think
Yeah.
it was on TikTok where they're showing the body bags and the lockdowns and, like sealing people in, like soldering their doors shut. Does the Chinese government even allow its own citizens to have TikTok?
That's a good
Does
question.
anybody know?
Well, I
Should
believe
I ask
that-
TikTok?
Yeah, I believe they do, but they're going to control it. Look, in China, you during COVID, that you couldn't go out of your house if you didn't have your phone on, if you were caught, and they used facial recognition. You couldn't buy anything. They told you when you go to buy your groceries to come back. While you were going down the street, if you bumped into anybody or talked to anybody, and they were deemed to have COVID or tested positive, you then had a quarantine. The total population control all through the phone. And it
dangerous.
really is scary. You can't travel. Like, they can't go from city to city or anything, but it's how they shut everything down. And we go back to those COVID lockdowns, and a lot of the hysteria that was coming out, a lot of that was pushed through TikTok. And look, I believe COVID was real. I know people that got sick from it and passed away. But at the same time, I think there was a lot of government control, and we fought back against our state government and the Wolf administration over their overregulation. But now, I mean, it's worse with some of the social media than what people felt that they were giving up during COVID.